Mr. President, please call the return of service.
Thank you, Your Honor. This time I'd like to make a motion that we accept the call to return to service.
Motion made and seconded by Mr. Perkins. Any discussion about the return of service as all members have been properly noticed? Seeing none, then I'll try your minds on acceptance. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, signify by saying nay. Ayes have it, motion carries unanimously. The first 30 minutes of each council meeting are reserved for public speaking. I'd ask that any member of the public that wishes to address the council, please do so about an item that is specifically on the agenda, and you must be a resident and or a taxpayer of the city of Danbury to address the council. With that, is there any member of the public that wishes to address the council this evening? You're perfectly in order.
Good evening. On behalf of the Danbury Board of Education, I want to thank you once again for inviting us to speak tonight. I would be remiss in not expressing disappointment on behalf of the board that you did not or have not, as of yet, supported us in ratifying the teacher's contract. We do feel that it is a fair contract with a generally low general wage increase of 2.3 and step of 1.9 for a culminating average of 4.25. And it is our wish that you do join us in supporting the contract this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Any other members of the public wish to address the council this evening? Mr. Anders? And then Mrs. Baker.
Frank Anders, 9 Terra Glen. I wasn't here for the full meeting before, and I apologize. But one thing that I did hear that I would like to expand upon just a little bit is something Mr. Levy mentioned. And he's speaking as a businessman who owns his own business. So he does something that I'm kind of familiar with, and that's risk assessment. And I guess maybe what I'd ask you to consider is take a look first at what the risk is that there will be a negative outcome from arbitration. If your decision or if your conclusion is the risk is moderate, then vote your minds, as you've already done. But if there's any concern that the risk is significantly negative, you might want to think twice. 2% is probably not all that bad, or whatever that exact percentage was. Just a thought, just for you.
Mrs. Baker.
My name is Barbara Baker, and I live at 22 Sleepy Hollow Drive. First, let me commend Mr. Levy for voting the way his mind told him to vote. I've been in that position. It's not easy to be the only one, but I commend you for voting the way you should have voted. I don't know how many of you folks know, but I was on the Danbury Board of Education for 17 years. So I have been involved in many negotiations. I was chairperson for 10 of those years, which means I was the head honcho in those negotiations. I know how much work goes into negotiating. The teachers come in with their proposal, the board comes in with theirs, they negotiate, there's give and take, there's all kinds of things before an agreement comes up. And I think that they have done a good job. You need to look at not just the financial, the dollar and cents of this proposal, but the teachers have agreed to pay more for their insurance. They have agreed to pay more for their prescriptions. And you must also realize that the teachers do not pay Social Security. When Social Security, the employee pays half, the employer pays half. The teachers union pays into their own retirement and no one helps them. So when you're comparing a policeman's contract to a teacher's contract, those are the kinds of things you have to take into consideration. Other employees get paid overtime. Teachers don't. And I know for a fact how many hours teachers put in. They have meetings after school, they correct homework after school, they do all sorts of things. So you need to take that into consideration as well. Other employees, they get time and a half or whatever they get. That's added to their salary. So when you look at the salary scale, you can't compare that. I also would like to commend the lady on the end, I'm not sure of your name, for taking the time to read the contract. I got the impression from many of you folks that you didn't even read the entire contract. You probably, knowing people the way I do, you probably read the financial parts and that's all you read. Please consider that if you go to binding arbitration, the teachers' union pays for one arbitrator. The school board, i.e. the taxpayers, pay for the other arbitrator. And they both pay for the neutral arbitrator. Now when I was on the board, they were getting hundreds and hundreds of dollars an hour. I have no idea what they get now. That has to come out of the school budget. That has to come away from teacher salaries. These are things that you need to take into consideration. And I hope that all of you, I'm sorry that things happen so fast. You hear the public comments, you hear the officials and then you have to vote right away. So you don't have time to think about it. I have some problems with that, but I guess that's not your fault. So I ask you to please think about these other issues before you vote. Thank you.
Mrs. Baker. Any other, Mr. Falconton?
Harry Falcon from 10 Terre Haute Road, Danbury. Mr. Mayor, members of the Common Council. I just wanted to explain to maybe some of the teachers here what real life is like. I spent 37 years in industry, spent any number of Sunday afternoons driving to Kennedy Airport so I could fly to the coast and be in a business meeting in California at 9 o'clock Monday morning. Never got a penny of overtime for it. Paid into Social Security for 40 years. I now am retired and I draw about 25% of my final year's salary, not 75% like teachers draw who don't pay into Social Security. Twice in my career, 2 different decades, 2 different companies, 2 different bosses, a meeting was called. We were told that things were tough economically, accounts receivable wasn't bringing in enough to pay the bills. Couldn't afford to lay off people because you can't dig out of a hole that way. So we're all taking a 10% pay cut until things get better. And the boss pointed out that he was the president, he was making more money than the rest of us, so 10% of him was more hard dollars than it was for us. But that's the way it is in real life. So to go to the teachers at this point in time and say, hey, kick in and help us out, I don't think is asking too much. Thanks for your time.
Any other member of the public wish to address the council this evening?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. My name is Susan Meehan. I'm a taxpayer at 4 Brighton Street in Danbury. I'm also a social studies teacher at Danbury High School, and I'd like to say that the teachers in Danbury are the finest group of professionals that I've ever worked with. I've had or worn other hats in my previous life. I went to night school recently, and I'm only in my 6th year of teaching. I'll never make it to the retirement package at 75% of my salary. The kids will be pushing me out in a shopping cart. This gentleman asked what was the direct impact in the classroom, and I know that there were professionals here to answer that question, but I'd like to tell you a little something about my department. There will be 5, that 2 of the positions will not be rehired. We have a number of electives in our department as well as the high school. That includes areas in the humanities, in the arts, in math, in all spectrum of curriculum. In our department, we stand to lose as many as 10 elective classes that could impact hundreds of students. What are some of the electives we offer? Anthropology. There are only 2 schools in the state that offer anthropology. Danbury is a flagship school. Mr. Ron Carrizzo developed a curriculum for that, taught it for many years. Sociology, political science, Asian studies, my particular niche for the past 2 years. Intro to psychology, philosophy, criminal law. We also offer a variety of advanced placement courses. So we're catering to the entire spectrum of students. I've watched kids with below average abilities in my core classes improve over the years and take some of the electives that are a bit higher challenge. So those are things that, as it stands now, might not be replaced, and that doesn't even take into account if further reductions were made. I think that would deeply impact the students at the high school, and I just wanted to make you aware of that fact. Thank you for your time.
Any other member of the public wish to address this facility?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Joseph De Silva. I reside at 17 Mountainville Avenue in Danbury, Connecticut. First, I'll ask the council members to please excuse the fact that I'm casually dressed. I was not planning on addressing the body tonight. I am a product of the Danbury Public Schools. Mr. Councilman Seabury had the dubious honor of having me in his class many years ago, far more than we would like to admit, I'm sure, either one of us. I understand the quandary the council is in when confronted with this contract. As a bit of, to echo former Board of Ed Chair Baker's comments this evening, I am an attorney and I just completed an arbitration not that long ago. A single arbitrator case, relatively simple construction contract, where we had to pay the arbitrator 8 to 10 hours of review time beforehand to review materials and briefs and everything, and come down and do a 2-day arbitration, then render a decision. Cost each party somewhere in the vicinity of about $14,000 to $15,000 each for that arbitration. That was a single arbitrator pursuant to the American Association of Arbitrators rules and methodologies and provisions for an arbitration. I would caution that it is likely that a 3-arbitrator panel, 1.5 times of which cost is borne by the union and 1.5 times the cost of which is borne by the city, is liable to be far in excess of that. I think it'd probably be safe to add an extra 0. That's number one. So the costs of arbitration are not negligible, number one. Number two, any contract like this is negotiated, all pieces and parts of it. And there are members on the council tonight who are in unions and or are subject to employment contracts or have negotiated them. When you take this, we are focusing here, most of the commentary tonight was focused on one piece of this contract, the pay raise. That was one piece. There are lots of other components. When this goes to the arbitrator, all bets are off and everything's in front of the arbitrator. Which means by the time the arbitrator's done, he could side with the 3 members could decide with the city on the pay raise and against the city on other issues. By the time you're done, it may cost more. Take that into consideration when you vote tonight. That's my only comment. Thank you very much.
Any other members?
Thank you, Your Honor. My name is Lynn Tabersack. I live at 110 Haystown Road, and there is not a full moon tonight. I wanted to say 3 things to the council before you make this vote on rejecting a contract. One is that I believe the council as a body has never done this before. And I think that you want to say to yourself, well, we've never had such a bad contract before us. That is a reason for rejection when you have a bad contract before you. But you're going to take a historic vote tonight. Headlines: Danbury Common Council rejects first contract. So make sure it's a bad contract that you're turning down. The second thing is that, what is the second thing? That when you reject this contract, it isn't rejected, it goes to arbitration. And as far as I know from what Mr. De Silva said, what's been said before, is you're going to pay for that. All right? The last thing is you're liable to have your heads handed to you in arbitration, and we'll get back the same thing. And if there was a fourth thing, why do people move to Danbury? Is the primary thing that they want low taxes? I think a lot of people move to Danbury because we have such a wonderful school system. And I hope you'll consider keeping it wonderful.
Any other members of the public wish to address the council this evening? Mr. Brooks.
This Common Council meeting has two topics, one of which is the charter. Is that going to be spoken of completely separately?
No, that's part of this meeting.
Last time, Attorney Rick Gottschalk had asked you to withdraw 7-8 modifications because he said, as we had pointed out, there's some technicalities and difficulties with the way it's written. So I would just reinforce that. It sounded as if it had been rejected, but this is like a deja vu as far as having to say it again. The other thing is, I wanted to speak out in favor of the financial aspects. All of us have had educations that we thought were good, some excellent times, some fabulous times. This is a total disastrous economic cycle, the likes of which I never dreamed of. I'm 65 years old, not old enough for the Great Depression, but old enough for this depression that we're going into. Even President Obama has tried to prepare the public for sacrifice. This is not a referendum on the quality of the teachers or of the school which my kids went through, which obviously we sent them to the school because we thought of the school system because we did respect it. There's absolutely no way for the average person to go through this and feel that economic times haven't changed radically from what that lady said from September until now. So please, if you concentrate on the financial, I understand that from her point of view of everyone that spoke, some of whom I respect so greatly, that it's bad for the teaching system, but it is possibly allowing more people to survive economically. And believe it or not, a lot of the people I've spoken to in my neighborhood, etc., they're having a hard time just surviving, and it's very difficult to fund something as wonderful as education, or as wonderful as a park improvement, or as wonderful, even let's say, as the police station. All these great things come at a price, and I think we're going to be seeing next year and the year after a lot more of these decisions. So I'm just here to say that if you do feel in your heart that the financial issue is important, obviously you've made a decision, and I think we should respect that also. It shouldn't be that we burn crosses on people's lawns because they're, quote, against education, or against mother, or against apple pie, or anything like that. So thank you for taking all the time. I know this is exhausting, and I just wanted to put in a little bit aside from the mass of people who are all one-sided and had very good points. A lot of people are basically going to be out on the street with no jobs, and with no increases, and with no vacations, etc., and they should be still in the equation.
Any other member of the public wish to address?
May I come up there?
Highly irregular to have somebody speak twice. Does the council oppose to that, or by unanimous consent? If you can make it.
Nobody else has anything to say.
Does anybody else in the audience have anything else to say before our chairperson does? Okay.
Okay, real quick. There have been many points about arbitration brought up before you tonight, but one that hasn't, that I believe should be made clear, is that in arbitration, the arbitrator will pick between two positions. So if we come in at 3.25 and the contract is for 4.25, he doesn't get to say somewhere in the middle. He or she is either going to pick one or the other. And I think that's just important to keep in mind. Okay?
So we just need your address.
Oh, I'm sorry. 14 South Street, Unit 15.
Thanks. Anybody else wish to address the council? Seeing none, then we'll move on to, I have no announcements this evening. We'll move on to item 1.